Welcome to the Second Chance podcast, where we explore the deeper inner workings of the human psyche, finding new ways to reinvent and invent ourselves for the better, for the wiser, for the more rational, and the happier and more content life. Discussion around slavery is always a contentious and sensitive issue, although we'll delve in and explore it to its fullest depths, because that's the only way to get past and through that frame and come to insight, which will benefit our lives. All people are equal. Now, that proposition has to be recognized at the fundamental level of the human being. So, if all people are equal, then everything that they do has to be equal. Their work has to be equal. Not just their opportunity, but their end results. When, for example, one person is serving another or helping another or being subservient to another, that sounds like an attack, an assault on equal rights. So that being the case, there has to be strict lines, black and white lines that are drawn to define and to display what equal rights and equal liberty actually mean. The notion that we all are free to choose, I think, is where it really gets drawn. Because if one person chooses one path and that gets denied that path, not by any means just by the fact that their status or their value of being is not worthy of that pursuit, I think that would be a defiance of equal rights. But it wouldn't go so far as to say that just by serving another, there is a breach of equal rights, because service is still ample and available and cannot be undermined through rule books. The waiter, the street cleaner, the garbage man, the many professions, the many monetary profession, meaning it's based on their own income. It's through their choice, meaning anytime a street cleaner wants to walk away, they can walk away. It's choice based, but at some level it's not choice based, because they would rather be the one enjoying the street of which they are cleaning. They're servicing the street to the people that are enjoying the street. So, but there's a certain acceptance. They recognize that they're servants and they choose to be servants. So we're giving choice to be servants. Equal rights allows people to have the choice to serve who they want to serve, or to be masters in that case. But what has changed? Fundamentally, it's still the same. The street cleaner is still serving the populace. The waiter, the maidservant, the house cleaner, the babysitter, all the servitude professions, and I'm not just talking about servitude. The steel makers, the bread and butter, the wood mills, the farmers, they're also servicing somebody. The farmer doesn't eat their produce. They produce and they distribute that produce. That farmer is servicing society, and society is the benefit of that farmer. Now, if you go down this pipeline, where is the end? Isn't everybody in servitude to society? Well, the higher up you go in intellectual profession, the more there's their control and influence in society versus society's dependence on them. Each person gets to choose, and the equal rights system and the all men deserve liberty system and all those systems, they get to choose. I think the freedom of choice is really what we're pursuing. It's not the equal rights. Because is it right that someone goes can collecting to make a couple bucks and then someone gets to produce millions of bottles of those cans and make millions and billions of dollars? What's equal about that? And you could say that they all had the choice to be that. I disagree. Very likely that the can collector does not have the ability to get to that place. They're just not built the same way. They just don't have the environment to get them to that place. And you might argue that no, they do. They can get there. But if you really study their life and you study your own life, there are limits. And those limits are real and true. You can push them, like the American dream. You can push the limits to a certain extent. But at some level, you're going to hit a barrier. So when you say equal rights, you can't be asserting this claim that each person has this liberty to be whatever they want, because people cannot be whatever they want. If the street cleaner had a choice to be a street cleaner or to be riding in horse and buggy in the romantic, enjoyment of that street, they would prefer that. They would prefer to be in that next tier of experience. Now, you might claim that no, they chose to be the street cleaner because they signed a contract with the municipality, and that is who they are. But we can answer that quickly by saying, how much of a choice is it? They have to survive. They need monetary assistance to survive. And to do that, they don't have the opportunity to do anything else but the subservient levels of servitude that these professions consist of. So even though it appears that there's choice, it's truly limited. Now, you're right. The individual facing the municipality has choice. They could pick another municipality. They could pick another profession similar somewhat to that profession. They have an array of options. But options doesn't mean that there's no servitude. If a person could be a slave in one household and move to another household, and they have the option to move to another household. There's choice in their being for that. It doesn't mean they're free from servitude. They're just as slaves, although they have a drop of autonomy to move about in the sphere of what they can do in society that will produce some sort of monetary expenditure. This being the case, why so different? Why is the master-servant reality so different in 21st century modern era? Although there's just this drop of choice, generally speaking, it's just the same. It's this, what would you call it? It's this same dynamic between the master and the servant. There are servants in society, the waiters, the chefs, the builders. They're servants because although it appears as they are autonomous and their free choice, especially because they can choose, they're not forced into one labor. They are servicing the residents of the house they're building and the building they're constructing. They are servicing, the waiters are servicing the people for their food, for their drink. The chef preparing food for others to eat, not for them to eat. The waiter doesn't bring food for themselves, it's food for others. There's servitude involved. Now, because they have a choice between one restaurant and another, that doesn't open up any doors in their own experience of servicing society at a deep level, or servicing individuals at a deep level. But maybe you want to propositionalize that, no, we need to erect a deeper notion of freedom, where, no, that's wrong too. Nobody gets served. Here's where the irony comes in. That will never happen. It can never happen. Although Marxism is dealing with that in a way. It's trying to fix that. It can't work because we are built as human beings from masters and servants in our own individual, right? There are priorities in our being. We have vital organs and less vital organs. If we were to choose between saving the heart and saving a limb, we would always choose saving the heart. It's almost not a choice, because it's so serious. It's so real. That one causes death, the other one doesn't. It's risk, but it's not death. We're built fundamentally from a state of parts of our being servicing other parts of our being. For example, our hands bring to us or give away from us. Right? So the hands itself don't get to enjoy the produce of their actions. They just bring to the mouth. And even the mouth doesn't get to enjoy it. The stomach does, and so on. There is lower levels and higher levels in this hierarchy of our own being. That being the case, we're going to outsource our own needs automatically when we can, because we can't farm and tend to the water availability and the energy and the other essentials that we need for somewhat of our survival. We can't tend to all those things at once. We allow others to serve us. We allow the energy companies to service us and bring us energy, and the water and the pipelines to bring water to us, and so on and so forth. We allow others to produce for us because we need others. So who's to say why the energy worker or the energy business should be running? Maybe they should enjoy energy just like everyone else. But at some point they made decisions, choices that they are going to serve society because they might not have the wits to be the master. Now, some people, it comes fundamental. It's like right away at a young age, they know, okay, I don't have what it takes, so I'm going to do this or that. Or some people, they fall into it. They attempt to be the masters, and then at some point, it's just they don't got the knack. It's just not there. Are we to look down at the servants? Well, do you look down at your hands because they're not as vital as your heart? Of course not. They're extensions of you. Now, the best servant is one that recognizes that. As strange as it sounds, the best servant is one who recognizes their servitude status, but also recognizes the importance of that, because the servant is serving the master. And in the best form, it's an extension of the master. So the servant becomes the identity of the master and could sprout forth as far and as wide as the master chooses, but as much as they choose, because they're the hands, they are the extensions of the master. And that gives opportunity for an amazing relationship, because the master cannot tend to all the dealings. They can only tend to the most important that they feel are necessary in their being. And the servants surround them and do the tedious work that's necessary for the master to enjoy and pay attention to the more important things. For example, those who read a lot, right? And study and connect to intellectual property. Well, you have to have a luxury for that. If you have such availability to read a book, that means that you're getting provided for monetary needs at some level, and that you can let go of your earthly boundings to tend to something more profound. Just the mere fact that you have the availability to read mentally and physically demonstrates the master notion of life. Now, there are those that won't tend to any books their whole life, and it could be because they've found it to be foolish, even though they had the opportunity, or they just disregarded it. But most likely, they just didn't have an environment that opened up to that world. But that's not terrible. That's not evil. That's fine, as long as they're servicing those who do read. And why do I say that? Because they get the benefit of the readers, right? The ones who are more intellectually inclined, because they're in constant contact. They become the extension and become the identity of them. So not only do they get the master's being experience, the master's experience, they also get their own monetary needs in that relationship. Now, there are those in society that will say, no, I'm not going to be a servant, but I can't be a master. They recognize their limits of environment, their limits of genes, and so on and so forth. And they just know, or they would have to flip the world around to become the master, and it's just not in their playing cards. And then what happens is that they recognize that servitude is somehow cheap, because you're the arms of the master and not the master. You're servicing someone, and that's bothersome to them. And we'll explain why. But that's bothersome to them, and they won't admit that that's where they need to be. So they won't serve. They won't work. They won't put themselves in that. So they'll enjoy their poverty. They'll manage, because we're a socialist environment and we are rich, so you can't survive without working. And in this, they really become the pitiful states, the pitiful parts of society. I'll tell you why. Very simple. If you don't serve and you're not a master, then who are you? You're not benefiting society, and you're not benefiting yourself. So what you're left is with this mountless amounts of space and time, which is used for nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing of master-like material, intellectual, the high regard, the profundities of life. And what's left is this like entertainment pursuit, because there's something that we need to fill our beings with. And it's the breeding ground for crime. That's the truth. Because if you have nothing and you do nothing and you are nothing, then it's easy to treat human beings like nothing. and especially the items of human beings, is nothing. And what's left is this devastation. It's a breeding. Crime will flourish where someone doesn't take a role and just assumes that they don't have to be anything. And somehow trying to get some entertainment, somehow to say or to demonstrate that their life has some sort of function. The smart ones serve. The really smart ones serve well. The exceptional ones attempt to gain master-like attributes at some point. Now, here's the fine line. If you're a servant, and I mean this in a more profound sense, if you're a servant and not a master, can you ever attain master status? And I find this to be also a repulsive demonstration in society where sometimes the opportunity lends itself that allows for someone to reach from servitude to be a master. And sometimes the servant grabs that because who doesn't want to be a master? Who doesn't want to be on the top of the food chain? But in doing so, they seem to forget the fact that they have so many attributes that really define them as a servant. They just don't have it. They don't have the knack. They don't have the intellect for it. They don't have the horizon, the necessary horizon that a master has, where they could see far and wide, and they're in the generality of things and the specific of things. They're framed well, but they don't have that because you need to have a lot of things to go well to have that, and not just in you, in your environment, in your upbringing, in your experience, in your thought. There's a lot of elements that bring to something like that, and it's not just attained. Although at some level it could be attained, but it's usually not attained. It's usually given. The exceptional cases, there's an attainment, but it's a long and tedious process. Anyway, so they grab onto this, this onion. They grab onto the savior of being the master as opposed to the salvation of being the master as opposed to the servant. And in doing so, they become this repulsive form of master because since they know their inadequacy, they know their weakness, they're missing fundamentally from being the master. It troubles them, and they don't know how to deal with the exposure of being master. They just don't have the ability for that. So what happens is they attempt it because they know that there's a role of being a master, especially because they're pursuing it. So they attempt the role of being master while not knowing the truth of what it means to be a master. And they are the ones that abuse it's called abuse, the master status, but really it's not abuse. It's just taking on a role that they don't understand. So they assume that being a master is subjugating. Sounds right. So they begin to subjugate. But a fool they are, because why would you subjugate your own arm? Why would you subjugate what feeds you, what gives you food and drink, what allows you to thrive? Why would you want that? Would you subjugate yourself because you're receiving that? And they do all these repulsive sort of actions that really destroy society. They destroy the servants because they're subjugating people, and that's never good. And they destroy themselves in the process because they're just these horrific subjugated characters. They're just subjugating others and they're subjugating themselves. So that being the case of the 2 points of repulsion, one is the servants who won't accept their servitude, and the servants who attempt to be masters although they don't have the proper knack for it. So there has to be a representation and the masters of not the role, but the respect that I'm the master. Like, listen to me, similar to the brain. Like, I'm, yeah, 3 ounces, whatever the brain weighs. But I spend my whole life calculating and learning and experiencing. Listen to me because I have good advice. Don't listen to the arms. The arms want to do stuff, but listen to the mind, right? It's like, have that conversation. The master needs to demonstrate, not in a role like, oh, I'm a master, listen to me because I'm the master and you're the servant, but more like, I'm here and I have more to say than that. And it's important to listen because we need to be in a relationship. It's demonstrating the relationship of master servant, but with the utmost respect. It's hugging the servant, but just recognizing that you're a servant. And not in the terrible way either. Now the servant, the same idea. There's this yes sir, like, and we have it now with waiters, yes sir. We have it with the real servitude professions. You'll see the speech of the servant to the master. It's demonstrated so easily. There is almost nothing different than 500 years ago with the servant master relationship. It's that similar. So the servant recognizes their place. They give a respect, but the respect is not for the master to feel better, more valuable. The respect is for them, really. The respect is, you are this being that I'm attaching to. I recognize that, and I'm going to live my life accordingly. And that creates this beautiful dynamic. So, again, just to recap, the servant that doesn't accept their servitude and just tries to be in this space of nothingness because they can't be the master and they can't be the servant because all servants are subjugated to something. They are breeding grounds for crime because there's no value system. There's nothing to attain to. There's nothing of value. Blood is cheap. Being is cheap. The possessions of others are cheap. It's so easy. I'll give you one example of this. I saw an interview of a drug dealer who spent so much time in prison, maybe 10 years, 15 years, I'm not sure. And he was justifying or explaining his choice to go into crime. And he explains thoroughly that, well, if I worked at, let's say, McDonald's, I would be making whatever, $10 an hour, $100 a week. But if I work, in the drug trade, I would be making $1,000 a day. And you stop, pause the video, and you say, well, he has a great argument. He's not going to be able to be, a top-notch lawyer. He accepts that. He recognizes that the next step from McDonald's is manager, and then corporate. They don't. It's not in his playing card. So he recognizes that he can't be the master. But now he says that instead of choosing to be the master, I will let go of my servitude and rather go to a game that you don't have to be master servant. You just have to be willing to destroy your morality. The foolishness of this is that 10 years in prison, you don't make any money. So the risk of prison is just so serious in such a game. So they don't win. If anything, they became worse than the servitude of working at McDonald's because they don't have. They've made only $1 a day when it came down to it because they made tons of money for a couple $100,000 or not even 20,000 in a span of a month. Got arrested, spent 10 years in prison. You calculate that together, and we're talking about a very small amount. So they are servants, and recognizing that the probability of that to happen is extremely high, if not almost. It's not a probability. It's this will happen. You can't just play the drug trade and not end up in prison. So it will happen. But it's not being calculated together. So that's like the real servitude, where there's just no real calculation. It's like, okay, I'm absolved from being a servant, but instead I'll take on something that will be even worse. I won't just be the street cleaner, I'll be the can collector. And claiming that somehow the can collector is a better profession than the street cleaner. Because there's some clickbait of this moment I make tons of money, not calculating the bigger picture. In a way, truly subjugating themselves by trying not to subjugate. That's the strange thing. That's what really happens. It's another level of subjugation. Meaning you could be a servant to the highest master. You could be, let's say, the secretary of the president of the United States, right? You could be the secretary of state. And that's the subjugation. You're a secretary at some level, right? There's a form of secretarial, profession in this, but it's to the highest master that they can imagine. So it's a very profound, it's a very sought after position. Even masters will seek to servitude to the president. Or you could be a servant of McDonald's and serve people burgers, right? That's also, there is a master there, the people enjoying the burgers. But then there's a lower level than that, and that's servitude of the foolishness of mind, where somehow a couple days of $10,000 adds up and makes sense to 10 years in prison, and that just works somehow in their minds. Even though a normal thought process would not entertain such an idea, even if it means making that $100 a week at McDonald's. So that being the case, I don't think that equal rights fixed much in the master-servant dynamic. I think it allowed for society to keep opportunity available for everybody, but I don't think everybody is available to that opportunity. And I think knowing that is important, because then you know your role. And mind you, every master is a servant to somebody, right? Even the president is a servant to the diplomatic ties, or the other presidents, or the other relationships. Everybody is a servant at some level, but also a master at other levels. So it's not such an evil thing when you see everybody within those frames. That's all I gotta say. Thanks for listening. And if you would like to see the video version of this, check out my channel on YouTube.